Well, welcome back. We're in 8th grade art here, working on this project, as you recall, where we took basically a blank paper, simply had this printed on it, which will be our subject matter, put in a background, which we imagined, roughly sketched it in quickly, then took some time to tag the colors on it, and then went back and put bold lines over top of our grid squares so that we can navigate the drawing. Made sure that it was easily identifiable with the letters across the top, number down the side. Put things in the wrong square, of course. You may draw it perfectly, just in the wrong square. Then you have to fix it. So this is all our planning work. A little bit less planning work required this time than in the design unit. And then this is where we got to yesterday, if you are drawing what I am drawing. And that is perfectly fine, and I would encourage you to do that. If you are coming up with your own material, I don't have an issue with that either. Now, I have a theory about working from the largest objects and the most simplistic areas toward the smaller, more complex material. And that's what we did yesterday by simply spending time dotting along here and blocking out the area of the drawing which is going to contain the car, which we were going to get to. However, by working in a lot of the more simplistic material in the background, especially if you've kept it simple, what you're going to find is the car almost draws itself, at least the outline of it will. And so that's one of the more fascinating parts of making a drawing sometimes, is to watch the subject matter emerge from the background or the negative space. So with that said, let's just keep on working as we go along here. Now, I also like to clean up my drawing as I go along, especially in areas that I know I have already finished. And this material in the background is all flat and will be colored in flat. So I can erase anything that I've completed so far that has grid lines going through it. And in this case, it would be parts of the sun and the clouds up here. So I am going to go ahead and dress that up. Now, you got to make sure that what you've drawn is accurate, because once you erase these grid lines, you may have to redraw them if you need information or you need to analyze a portion of your drawing. I feel pretty confident, although that's got me in trouble many times, but I am pretty confident that I have completed the drawing in these areas. And it will simply be a question of coloring it in. Okay, let's see what else. This stuff in the sun right here can be gone. And these little cap erasers are really, really fantastic for doing work like this. And if you have access to one, I would put it on the end of the pencil there and use it as we go along. When you're making a drawing, and these drawings should be 12 by 18 inches, 12 inches tall by 18 inches wide, and as such, they're pretty large drawings. They are twice the size of our subject matter that we are working from. Okay, so this is all looking relatively good so far. Take this out of the sky right there, and then I can get back to work on analyzing the information on my worksheet here. Let's see. So drawing units, in fact pretty much all of the projects, require it's turning out about 10 to 12 days, depending on the pace that the class can work at as a group. It's kind of difficult to really push the instruction faster than some of the students are able to create it. And so in that case, there comes a time when you simply just have to slow the operation down, because it's a group lesson, of course. Now that looks great already. Okay, I'm ready to move on here now that I've got my cleanup work done. Okay, it looks like yesterday when I left off, I was working on this mountain right here and this cloud as well. And so I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and start this mountain and then draw this mountain in, and that should show me precisely where I need to draw the rest of this cloud in, and that will allow me to get more of my background done there as well. So in this case, it looks like the top of the mountain, if I had to analyze these things, it looks like the top of the mountain right there is in square C2. And if I were to split my square, and I do this frequently because it helps me understand what I'm looking at, then I would notice it is also in the upper right quadrant. So if I go to square C2, which is right here, it's funny, I just erased some lines out of there, and I split it, then this is not quite in the center. It tends a little bit toward the lower left of that little mini split. So I'd have to say if this is the middle, it tends toward here about right in here, I suppose. So that little registration mark is going to give me something that I can draw from. So I'm going to go to square A3, and that looks like it's just a little bit over halfway. So there's A1, 2, and 3. And if this is not quite halfway, this is a little bit more. If this is halfway, this is just slightly more than that. So I'm going to put a dot there to register it. And then all I'm really going to do is start with the dotted line method that you've seen me use so many times in so many other of our projects. I do need to get out a card so I don't smudge my drawing. Alright, here we go. I'm aiming for this. And because we want it to look kind of natural, I'm going to wave that line along just a bit as I work my way toward the peak of the mountain, which is right here. Now that looks pretty good already, so I'm going to go ahead. I feel pretty confident about that. I'm going to go ahead and bold that line. So I get a mountainous looking curvature to it. That looks fantastic. Now I'm going to transit that line down here, and it is going to stop what appears to be in the dead middle of E3. So if I go to E3 and I plot a dot right in the middle of it, which if I were to do that here, you'd notice it's right there where it hits that chimney. And that is not on purpose. Well, actually it's just above that, so probably about right here. So this forces you a lot of times to really carefully look at your artwork that you're making. Now in this case I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to just kind of wave this line along. Even though it is a simplistic background, I still want it to have some sense of naturalism to it, okay? So not just like the mountains were cut out of construction paper and pasted on by a little child. So I'm going to keep dotting along, and that really is pretty good line. So just by waving it along a little bit and not not really concentrating too much, you get that more natural effect sometimes. So it's very difficult especially for people who are kind of obsessive compulsive, and many artists are, to not really try to control everything they draw. Okay, I'm going to bold these lines again just because I think that those lines are going to stay. And so I'm starting to actually see the drawing start to emerge from the grid squares and the paper that it is drawn on. And that's a fascinating experience too. When I go and screen the videos that I'm making for you right now, just watching the whole process happen in front of me is fascinating. Alright, now, so we've got our left mountain, the purple mountain's majesty, and now looking at our picture here that we're working with, we're going to go to square G1, it looks like, where the top of the next mountain is at. And I want to split square G1. I'm going to split square G1 up here on my 12 by 18 inch piece of drawing paper, ruled off into perfect 2-inch squares. Okay. Well, obviously the top of the mountain is in this upper left quadrant, and it's pretty much about in the middle of it all. I'm going to kind of just go ahead and put a dot there. Now my task will be to find where it originates, and that would be down here in square D2. And in square D2 it hits just about where this hits the line. If you look at this carefully, where this grid line is at and where this mountain hits, and this mountain hits, is like a valley of sorts there, isn't it? So that would be, I guess it would have to happen right here. So if that's the case, then we can kind of put a registration mark there. And this was a mark left from yesterday's work. I think it was right here by the cloud. So we're just going to try to work our way through this line and terminate up here. And we want it to look natural. So we're going to wave that line a bit as it moves along. I keep dragging my sleeves on all this. Here we go. That's a little bit steeper mountain than the other one was. Okay, so we're going for the naturalistic look here. And the dotted line method is a really, really useful tool when you are learning to draw or even perfecting your drawing technique. I mean, listen, I've been drawing my whole life. My grandmother, and whose grandmother doesn't say this, right? But my grandmother told me that I could draw about the time, convincingly I could draw things when I was around 6 years old. And she was so fascinated by that. And I don't even remember any of that, but I'm sure she had pictures that she had kept of mine. I do have my own work that goes back to my days in middle school, in fact, stashed away in my collection of art materials I've made over the years. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to erase this part right there from yesterday because it displeases me. So it's going to have to go away. Alright, so let's bold that dotted line up. So this dotted line method, what I'm trying to get at is I use it today myself, and I've been drawing since I was 6 years old, and I'm an old man. So if it works for me, I'm not saying it'll work for everybody, but it seems to have worked for most people that I've instructed over the years. Alright, we've got another mountain going, and it would be this one right here. So now we're simply going to continue that mountain down, and it runs off the paper over here in square I3. So all we got to do is find the proper spot in square I3, and the way I see it, it's just, just a little bit inside of square I3. So this is I3, and we come down just, not even halfway, but about right here. I'm going to put a dot right there. I'm going to kind of a tick mark and point it toward the top of that mountain. So now my task will be to, from the top of the mountain down to the registration mark there, to put in the other side of this mountain here. And see, this can develop really rather quickly once you get into the groove of doing your work. However, getting it started, it's tedious work many times. Coming up with an idea sometimes is not so easy either. This one goes about halfway, and it cuts off that square down there pretty significantly. Yeah. Flattens out and goes into here. Okay, so dotted line again. And the dotted line thing is not just, a rule of life or anything, but it does really allow you to see the line that you are attempting to create develop. And if you need to adjust it or erase parts of it, man, it makes it so much easier. And also it makes for, more control as you begin to bold the lines in your drawing. So it's just another variation of sketching technique. A lot of people use a lot of little sketchy bent lines and curved lines when they try to understand what they are seeing, and it's really just a variation of that. And I've used it many times with students, mainly because it keeps the occurrence of serious mistakes down, and it slows their work down to the point where they are a little more observant about what they are doing. Alright, I'm looking at my picture here that I'm drawing from, and it is actually starting to resemble the picture on the drawing table here. Okay, so having done that part, we're really getting making some progress here, but these are easy parts of the project, and that's my theory here. So now in square H2, right where it just barely about halfway down, H2, about halfway down, maybe a little more than halfway. See, now I may have needed to raise my mountain up a bit, but I've made the line, I've made the decision. This is about halfway down here, so if I go about halfway down, over here, I'll start this mountain right here, and it goes up to about right here in square I1. So we're going to start this mountain out, and it's just going to go up and disappear off of the paper right here. So more dotting, and you got to kind of turn your pencil whenever you're working with it, so that it you get a fine point on it all the time, rather than having to sharpen frequently. That is going to work just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and wave that line along a little bit so it looks more like a mountain, naturalism. Okay, very good. Now, this allows me to go back and examine parts of my drawing previously that I need to complete. So in this case, it would be this cloud right here, and I worked on that cloud a little bit before I had to get off and move on to something else. So I'm just going to continue this cloud, and through square D2 right here, it looks like it's got like 1, 2, 3, about 3 good lobes in it there, and it takes up a pretty good portion of that corner of the square there. And then it looks like there's a little bend up right there, so I'll put that right in there. And I'm not trying to precisely duplicate what I've got here, but I'm trying to stay pretty respectful of the planning I did. It's a lot of times it's you don't want to just make a plan and then bail out on it. Alright, this is okay. This will go right in here, because that's about halfway, right where that chimney meets. That's about right in the middle of this, about right in here, I'm going to say. So, my cloud looks alright. Okay, this one make a fantastic drawing, by the way, I am predicting. Alright, now, let's go and get this cloud in over here in square I1. And it comes out from about right here, it looks like. And it goes pretty much to about right here. Okay. And then it dives down and it disappears behind, almost at the grid line here. And I'm going to just one more little curl right there, and that will put it hiding behind this mountain. And kind of pooching out there a little more attractively than the way I roughed it in. I guess now I'm going to have to go back to my sunbeams. And I think I've only got this last sunbeam here to work with. So all I've really got to do is figure out where it goes down here. And in this case, it looks like it just barely enters in square E3 before it hits the mountain. And there's a tiny little triangle right there. So if I were to just orient my ruler so I get that tiny little triangle right there where the scrap of sky meets in. I'm going to fix that, because it'll make it easier to color if I just draw it right into it. Alright, here we go. So this is going to be that sunbeam, this bottom of the sunbeam right here. Okay. Now, the top of the sunbeam goes all the way to the top of H1, and it looks like it's about halfway across. So I'm going to put myself a little registration dot right there. I am now going to erase the marking that says it's 12 by 18 inches, alright? By now, I'm hoping you've already figured that one out. 12 by 18 inches. That's the size of our drawing. So from the center dot to, I have to go with a longer ruler for this. Okay, we will go with the clear ruler. To the dot in H1. There we go. And it looks like it passes through the cloud. So we'll touch the cloud here. It will emerge from the cloud, pass behind the mountain, just like it does in the little drawing. Right here, just a little bit of mountain showing. and then it will finish up here. Okay, now I'm going to mold that line. And we're going to see what we got. Looks pretty good, so we can erase this out. Okay, we're starting to get a drawing here. So let's do a little cleaning up, and if there's parts of the drawing that are essentially complete at this point, we're going to go ahead and clean some of the markings out of there so that we can see the drawing as it is created. And we can really analyze it a little better sometimes when we just simply compare it to what we have drawn. Okay, and it's nice to have a little brush, a duster brush, at your finger, at your hand, so that you can dust off any scraps of drawing and eraser scraps, because they can really... We're going to leave the letters and the numbers in for right now. We will still need to reference those as we move along in our drawing. Okay, let's see what else. It seems to me everything that's above row number 3 is all pretty well done, so I'm going to go ahead and finish my cleanup work here. And so the drawing seems to come along much faster and with much more enthusiastic participation from the students, I've noticed, when we draw the simplistic material first. And then you also end up with a little bit more of a commitment to it once it's already gotten started. It's when you know you haven't made progress on it, you've been sweating the details, that you tend to want to kind of just quit on it, or not give it enthusiastic participation. In this manner, if you do the information in your drawing that is easily analyzed, it kind of warms your mind up for more complicated work as the project progresses. So there's drawing is not about just how you make the drawing. Drawing is a lot about how you approach the problem solving of making a drawing. And I guess that's the difference between people who make actual artwork and people who just doodle their whole lives in their bedrooms, which is perfectly fine, although it's a hard way to make good progress if you're trying to, you know, if you have a desire to make a living in the arts at some level, then, you know, it's going to be, you're going to have to confront yourself with the way that you think about making your artwork, as well as confronting yourself with the practice of literally making it, like we're doing right now. So one is called the arte, and one is called the techne. The arte is what the philosophy and the beliefs behind what you make, whereas the techne is your hands making it, the practice of really creating it. So these are old Greek theories, and also evolved down through Roman culture as well. And it's funny that thousands of years later, the people of the world still really... Now this right here, let's see, I may have gotten too carried away there, and G2, right up against the line, G2, right up against that line is going to be, I'm going to have to maybe draw some of this back in. But that's okay. I won't have to draw in any of the sky, so I can continue there. I get talking about the arte and the techne, and you know, some people argue that the idea is more important than the actual piece of artwork, and then some people say, well, is it even a piece of artwork if it's not ever made? You know, so the techne makes it, whereas the arte thinks of it, creates it, or imagines it first. I think it's a hybrid of both of those things. Okay, now let's clean this up a bit, and let's see where I went off the rails over here when I was talking drawing theory. Okay, that's a lot of erasing. Okay, that's looking pretty good though. So I think where I messed up was that I had kind of forgotten that there is stuff in these squares, and so I'm just going to continue my theory here of working from the easy stuff to the more complex stuff, and we'll work through it. So right in the square middle, it looks like to me a square E2. We'll go to the square E2, and it's right here. Okay, I can still see the shadow lines on my drawing, and I'll bet you probably can too on the camera. So this is really just a rectangle that goes over just slightly into square F2. Okay, just slightly like that. And it looks like it is straight up and down all the way to pretty much the middle of square E3. So I'm going to move some of my materials about here. And so this looks pretty much like where it goes. So I'm going to continue that. I'll bold that line because I feel pretty confident about it. And the other one is at an angle above it, so if we were to kind of indicate our roof a bit like this, that would be this line right here. It's actually tilted more like this. Okay, so that gives me something to kind of aim at here, so I'm going to go ahead and bold this line a bit on my chimney. Then I can touch it up if I don't make it quite long enough. Alright, so that's the chimney of the house that the car is sitting in front of. I'm going to go ahead and bold up this line right here. And there's just a lot of things when you are planning a drawing, and that's what this whole worksheet was about. If you start intuitively placing things where you get kind of like landmarks that help you reproduce what you see. And in this case, so during the planning phase, and I'm not going to say I did it on purpose, but this corner ended up right in the middle of the square, and it touches the very edge of the mountain, and the cloud touches it. So I've almost got that precisely the way reproduced here on the drawing as I imagined it in my layout work. So I'm just going to continue doing what I do here by starting this roof line. So what I've got to do is figure out where it starts at and where it ends up here. And it's clearly on the line that separates G and H, so it's on the line that separates G and H, and it's in that second row, so I certainly can come down to about right here. And I guess if I had to measure it, I would find that it's pretty much about halfway down. So I'm going to come down this line, and about halfway down it, maybe just slightly more than halfway, I'm going to put a dot. Okay, now I'm going to go over here and find out where this is at. And this is in square D1, 2, 3, and it's almost on the very bottom of the square. So if this is square D1, 2, and this is square D3, it's down here, almost on the line, probably a little bit more like right here. And I just happen to know that it's just a hair above that because I can see it on my planning drawing. So I'm going to put a dot right there. Okay, now if done properly, I should be able to connect these two dots and make this line, which is the top of the roof of the house, which is behind the car. So from square D3 to square G/H2, we lay our ruler on the dots. We're going to make our mark. Now I'm pretty confident, but I'm thinking you should probably draw with a light touch if you can. Okay, so what that shows me is that I need to bring my chimney down a bit, but I won't have to erase anything. That's good. And bring my chimney down a bit right here, and I won't have to erase anything. Okay, very good. Now I can kind of erase this material out of here. And I've pretty accurately reproduced my chimney and the tilt of this roof right here. So let's go ahead and finish out the roof. It seems to come off the paper down here in an I3. It's a little bit more than halfway down. If this was halfway, then it's a little bit more than halfway down. So in I3, I1, 2, and 3, if this is halfway, it's a little bit more than halfway. So probably about right here, I'm thinking. So I'm going to put a registration mark right there. And again, from here to here, I'm going to draw a line, and this line goes off of the side of the picture. Hold the ruler down firmly, and I'm confident, so I'm bolding that line. Now let's see what we're getting here. We are starting to reproduce pretty accurately what we see in this picture in the background. It's starting to show up as an actual drawing. So in this case, I can erase these lines right here because we will not be using them anymore. Maybe that one right there too now. But certainly the ones between the mountains. Okay, so I'm going to dust that a bit. And we're going to continue on here. And I think that this progress is good for the day. Now the bottom of this is below the line over here. So we're going to go below the line. And it's about right here, and so I'm going to put a dot. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to measure this and double it. So it says to me that this is about 3/4 of a centimeter, meaning it would be 1.5 centimeters over here. That's pretty close. Okay, so this would be 1.5 right here. So I was within just a fraction of a centimeter there. Okay. Now, if I know that, it should be 1.5 centimeters up here as well. So from this dot, 1.5 centimeters down to right here, I'm going to put a dot right there, and I'm going to pronounce that dot so that I can reproduce the drawing. And then on the very edge here, 1.5 centimeters, dot, pronounce the dot. Now all I got to do is connect the dots. I'm going to move this off camera. I hope everybody's project is coming along here. It seems like these are complex projects, and you would be right. And my goal as an art teacher and as an educator is to make you work your mind, exercise your brain. And if you recall, if you were in my 6th grade class, in our drawing notes, we had an order of operations for how to make drawings through observation and measurement and expression and comparison. Well, that's still what we're doing, and it was all mental exercise, if you can remember that, part of your education when we had 6th grade art class, a physical classroom. But it is mental exercise, and it's good for your mind to be able to have sustained focus for long periods of time. And art is one of the ways that we teach you that. Music is another way that we teach you to have sustained focus over long periods of time. It's learning disguised as an activity that you may enjoy. But if it doesn't require you to expand your thinking, if it doesn't require you to exercise your brain, then it's really not much good to anybody. It's just an activity then that you may learn something from. Okay, look at what we're doing here. So the picture is developing very much like its background there, as I can see it. We've already got this part of the house done right here. So we're just going to continue to move on. I'm going to work on this window in here and keep just, drawing in all the background, and pretty soon what's going to happen is there's going to be nothing left but a car-shaped void. So it appears to me as though the distance for this trim work right here, the edge of the house, is about the same distance for this, and I just happened to recall that that was 1.5 centimeters. So I'm going to measure down 1.5 centimeters. I'm going to put a dot right here. And that will be the top of this window. Oh, there's the dinger. So what I'm going to do is draw in the triangle for this, and that's going to be a session. And when we return to the next session, we'll just continue working on our drawing. It may take several sessions to get it drawn. However, once we do that and we start coloring, it takes a long time to color these things, but it will be done. It will be a beautiful piece of artwork. We're going to transit down this line somewhere into square F3. So somewhere into square F3, and it just barely intrudes into that area, and it's kind of a parallel to this line right here. So all we have to do here is just make sure we're drawing parallel to the line, and it looks like that's pretty much parallel, and it's 1.5 centimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that line in. I'm going to do the same thing over here. If you notice, it goes into square I, and it's about the same parallel line. So it's just going to intrude into square I a bit, and we want it to be parallel to these lines right here. So it's really a stripe, almost like something from the design unit if you think about it. Okay, I'm going to draw that, and it will intrude into square I just a bit. Okay. Now let's see if we go and see, that's odd. See, it doesn't like that at all. It doesn't want to do that. So what I've got to do is lower this, and I'll have to extend this over here to make it look appropriate. So I'm going to level that out, strike my mark, and I will have to live with the fact. But see, there isn't anything in here anyway, so it'll be all right. Live with the fact that it didn't come out precisely the way I thought it did. I should have probably measured it. However, I can erase this out now, and this, just kind of fix that up a bit, and that should be enough for one day. I think we're getting a pretty good looking drawing starting to develop here. If you're drawing what I'm drawing, that's what we're attempting to draw, is what you see here. And what we were actually drawing at this point is this. So it's starting to come together. It's starting to look like what we imagined, or what I imagined. So that's all for today. Thank you for your attention, and I will get you in the next session. Have a nice day.